President Trump is acknowledging that he spoke with Ukraine's leader about one of the 2020 Democratic frontrunners, former Vice President Joe Biden. The president did not confirm or deny asking for an investigation into Biden's son or his business interests.
But Democrats want to know the details of the phone call, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said any effort by the White House to withhold information would mark, quote, a grave new chapter of lawlessness. For more on this, we're joined by CBS News legal analyst Kim Wehle. Good to see you, Kim.
Good morning.
So the House Speaker is calling this a serious possible breach of constitutional duties. Can you explain how this violates the Constitution? There's a lot of questions, I think, around this. And the president is trying to paint this as a partisan one. He's suggesting that somebody had a partisan bias against him or that was potentially even spying on him.
Yeah.
And explain what the whistleblower laws are in place for.
Okay, so there are three things happening here. One has to do, you mentioned the whistleblower complaint. Someone within the DNI who filed a complaint because he or she was sufficiently concerned about someone, a top-level White House official, in a conversation, which turns out with the Prime Minister of Ukraine. And the law is in place that says that goes to the Inspector General. The Inspector General makes a determination as to whether that's of, quote, urgent concern. And in that circumstance, the DNI, the director of the National Intelligence Agency, is required to turn the whistleblower complaint over to the United States Congress. So that handoff has not happened. It was supposed to happen in 7 days. The law is clear. The law is mandatory. The second piece of information has to do with the phone calls, the transcripts of the communications between the president and the Ukrainian prime minister. The White House is also refusing to turn those documents over, that transcript over. That's a little trickier in terms of the president's need, the office of the president under Article 2, to be able to have open, candid communications with foreign leaders. That's trickier. Number three just has to do with what to do about this information. There's also reporting that Mr. Trump, he denies this. He admits that he had the conversation, and the conversation was about the Biden family. But there's also reporting that Mr. Trump said, listen, we won't give you $230 million in needed military aid if you don't do this for me. We know the White House had stymied Congress in that point and ultimately gave it up in September. So what Mitt Romney, Senator Mitt Romney, Republican, has said is, listen, we need to know what actually happened. We need to know the information that happened in that particular transaction. Because if, in fact, the president said, you know, do opposition research on an opponent for the next presidential election, and in exchange, or if you do not, I will not release this aid, that under common law is extortion. And certainly extortion would be a high crime and misdemeanor that warrants at least impeachment hearings and potentially an actual finding of impeachment and removal from office.
So listen, you also have a new op-ed out in the Hill this morning. It's entitled, You're Tired of White House News, but the Constitution Needs You to Keep Caring. Do you think it's true that Vlad and I have often talked about whether or not there's a certain amount of fatigue here when we sort of hear these stories over and over again, and they don't ever seem to go anywhere? There's no resolution. So, Kim, tell me why you felt the need to write this piece.
Yeah, I mean, this is something actually I've been saying for months and months and months, even during the Mueller probe, because I'm a constitutional law professor. I have a book on the Constitution out. And the point really is that the Constitution is a job description. If people in that office violate the job description, there has to be consequences. We know this from our regular everyday life. If there are no consequences for blowing through a stop sign, you'll blow through the stop sign. People won't pay attention to it anymore in that sort of quiet corner in the neighborhood. And with this particular presidency, we saw this with the Mueller investigation. We know that this presidency and the campaign accepted willingly help from a foreign adverse power in the election. Now, that wasn't illegal. It wasn't a conspiracy, but it's a problem. And this next step is the next step. It's sort of a piece, potentially, if it turns out that there was an offer, essentially, or an intimidation. Listen, if you don't do this opposition research, we are going to withhold the aid. And we have to think about, we the people as Americans, how our government is structured. It's structured so that the people actually govern ourselves, and that people in office make decisions based on what's best for the people, not what's best for them personally. If we allow this, even if you support President Trump, if you allow this kind of activity to go unchecked, we are standing by in the creation of an unaccountable office of the presidency. If Congress doesn't do anything, if the judiciary can't because you can't indict a sitting president, then we're essentially creating what's close to a monarch. And monarchs in history have abused their power if there's no checks. It's human nature. That's the concern in this moment. And we're hearing with this latest episode more people making that argument that, listen, this is beyond politics. This is about preserving an accountable government for ourselves, for our children, and our grandchildren.
Really important points there, Kim. Thank you as always. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Coming up after the break, a CBS News investigation into shocking medical bills. One man said